If you love indie tales, be sure to subscribe here and on Twitch, where I'm live most weekdays. You can also show your support through Patreon or on itch.io, where I upload assets and games shown on the channel. Hey pals, welcome back to a new video. Today I've got another Insignia update for you. Please forgive the scratchy voice. I'm sort of recovering from being sick over the last week, but that doesn't mean that I haven't been doing a lot of work on Insignia. So on the stream, I've been working on, for the most part, demo content. Now, Insignia's demo, there has been one since 2020, and that was a Chapter 1 demo of the game. It reflects where I started with the game in 2017, which is basically the beginning, and then chronologically working forward into the end of the first chapter. So that exists, but that doesn't really reflect what I've been doing on the game for the past year and a half. So thinking more about the long-term combat system upgrades, how the game actually evolves, how the combat is evolved, and how that relates to platforming and quests and kind of like the meat of the game, right? The vertical slice in the moment to moment of once you're beyond that first chapter, once you're beyond that introduction. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. This pretty much falls in line with what I would be working on even if I wasn't producing a demo, but for the sake of kind of getting closer and closer to the position of funding the game and publishing the game, this is really important to me, right? I want publishers to be able to see the game at its best so that they can trust me with some budget to hire a team and continue sort of like pushing the content out towards release. The game is kind of close to being like feature complete systems wise in terms of like how I do XYZ. That includes cutscenes and dialogue and, you know, how I move the camera around, how I control the player character, how I save the game, menus, NPCs, like enemy design, all that stuff is pretty set in stone at this point. So my goal here is to kind of flex what I've built from a tools perspective with some content, right? That way, when people come in, I can sort of teach them how to use those tools and my workflow, and we can sort of churn the game out. So today I wanted to give you a bit more of an inside look into how I make the game. What you're looking at here is what is called Scene Graph. Now I designed this and built it myself. It is a plugin for Unity that allows me to get in really close to the whole world map, right? And see basically previews of all the levels that I've built and how they're kind of like laid out and chained together with doors that are in the actual scene objects themselves. And all I really have to do is drag and drop door connections to each other to build the world map. So the part that the demo will be taking place in starts around here and kind of takes us all the way over to here into this kind of cordoned off area of the game. This is the first of what I call crucible dungeons. They're basically areas where you unlock some progress, some permanent progress towards the rest of the game. It's kind of similar to a Breath of the Wild style shrine, but instead of being more catered towards just offering you a puzzle, it's more about teaching you some ability that you're going to be able to use out in the world. The game is sort of, over time, becoming a little bit more like a Metroidvania, but it's still quite linear, like a Zelda, so I don't know what to call it. Now, one of the core elements of the game are dialogue sequences and the cutscenes that come with them. So what you're looking at here is the Unity timeline with some custom clip tracks on it that represent my actual sort of dialogue sequencing. So the characters talking back and forth, and they get sort of played back when conditions are met to actually start the cutscene. Now, beyond that, I actually have a sequencing system that lets me basically copy and paste some text into the game, and that then becomes this back and forth kind of dialogue setup with all the text boxes. The characters who are speaking that dialogue are imported in. It's not just text back and forth, but like actual character objects with their associated text. And then those get imported into the actual timeline itself. So these are actual lines of dialogue that the system will play when the timeline reaches that point. So here's a cutscene kind of in action. Basically, I've got camera movements that I manually describe, and then I have the pre-written dialogue. The dialogue is placed on the timeline where I want it to be, and I can do kind of animations and more advanced stuff breaking down how that stuff works. I'm actually going to skip over to an area where you actually get to enter the shrine itself, or the crucible. So basically, later on you drop down here and you get to fight this enemy, and then when you trigger a certain condition, basically another cutscene starts. And you can see it gets a lot more complicated than that. So we had different shaders flashing off, we have the character kind of reacting, Armin's talking, he's also walking around, and then gameplay gets given back. So this is another one of those same sort of cutscenes. It looks like this when I'm working on it. So you can see triggers for the actual visual effects. We have the character animation, so Armin flinch. He's flinching, he's looking left and right, and then some dialogue, and then walking over, some more animation, and then more dialogue. So I'm going to show you that sequence again, and I'm going to let you sort of watch it back, and then I'll talk about what I've done this week to kind of make this work a little bit better. So the condition fires, and a bunch of stuff happens. This stuff is all related to save data, right? So the door being opened, the light on the forge here being lit in green, and the pedestal being lit up. All of those things need to be handled in a permanent fashion, and they all relate to the one condition, which is the player character kind of getting close enough to the pedestal while carrying that little gem that it fits in. Once the gem has been placed inside the pedestal, basically everything that followed in that cutscene needs to permanently be the case. If I save the game and load it, I want those things to still be that way. I still want the door to be open, I still want the pedestal to be lit up, and I still want the forge to be lit up. Now there are 4 pedestals in this area, and you'll have to find them kind of one by one. So those things all need to respect that one, what I call quest flag, right? The event happening of placing the gem in the pedestal is what's really important. But the actual visual sort of sequencing of that stuff in the cutscene happens in a staggered way. So they all want to trigger straight away, and ordinarily if I wasn't in a cutscene and that quest flag got tripped, all of those things would just happen simultaneously. The forge would light up, the door would open, the pedestal would flash, they'd all be the same. So I built a system that basically I call quest flag deferrers. A deferrer basically says, hey, I know there's a thing that you want to do right now, but there's a cutscene coming up that's going to tell you to do it later. So just hold on and I'll tell you when to go. It's like a surprise party. So I built that this week. I've also obviously been working on all the artwork for this stuff. So this forge is looking really good, and I'm really happy with how it's come up. And there's been a few iterations of that over time. Now, forges have always been a really important part of the game. Armin, the main character, is a blacksmith in training, and so having these places be kind of available to upgrade was a kind of important part. I was thinking for a long time that they'd be like save points, and in 2017 this is kind of what they look like, and I think in the demo they still look like this, in the 2020 demo. Since then I kind of have been working towards them being a bit more cool, a bit more eventful, because of their relationship with ability unlocks now. And this was a previous example. It's looking pretty good, but still not like enough. So then I started kind of like expanding even further, thinking about, okay, let's just make it bigger. Like, I have a tendency, and I think in pixel art it's very common to start small because you're thinking about the pixels, but sometimes you need something that's really big and really cool. So here's a really big, really cool thing. And this is the final result that I'm working with now. Much bigger, much more grand. The idea here is that it's not just a thing that I can just put in a level. It demands its own space, and that space, you know, can look a little bit more, you know, mysterious and interesting, and something that I can create, yeah, more of a scene around. So the last couple of weeks, a lot of dialogue, a lot of cutscenes, a lot of environment design, and even a little bit of level design too. So thinking about how this level and the actual sort of flow of the player's movement takes them through this space in such a way that they can actually kind of learn the system while also making progress. I really want to minimize the amount of backtracking you have to do, and sort of routing as the player. You know, if I want you to move left, I want it to be obvious that I need you to move left into the next scene. And, you know, rather than have you sort of like go between scenes back and forth to do something, I kind of want you to be able to feel like you're going forward all the time. So the arrangement of these rooms is something that, because of the scene graph that I'm using, I can rearrange, I can re-drag things and move them around. And over the week I did try like a bunch of different layouts. So this area here, you've got some high ground, and the only way to get up there is with the bounce ability, which you get from the forge, and by going through this kind of crucible. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of go left and do a sequence of rooms that are kind of like little puzzles. And then the goal is to sort of lead you back in a cycle to the original room, do a permanent upgrade on the weapon, and then be able to proceed forward and go on with the rest of the story. One thing that I'm trying to do that sort of puts the game apart from a game like Breath of the Wild is to have actual story and quest lines happening inside of my shrines, inside of my Crucible dungeons. So there is a side quest that's kind of being pushed forward as you go through these rooms. And the idea here is I don't want those two things to be so separate, the story and the gameplay. I really want it to feel like one fluid experience. So that's what I'm working on. I also did a little bit of work on my text box UI system, which is now much more carefully animated and feels a lot more professional, which it should. And that's about it. Next week, I'm going to be working more on this Crucible stuff, and if you want to catch it, you should check out my stream, where I'll be working on it all week. That's it for the update. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey, thanks for watching, and thanks most especially to the patrons and subscribers who helped support the channel. Check the links in the description to join that very special list, and for direct access to the demo and Discord. As always, have a great day, and I'll see you soon.